The
This
14th.
conference will now be recorded.
This is the 14th of January, and I'm Bob Platt, and this is the Arlington Senior Democratic Lunch, and we have two guests today. The first is James Devita, who's just announced his candidacy for the county board, and as you know, he did run last year, and he's well known to our ACDC family. And without further ado, I'll let James introduce himself further.
Good afternoon. My name is James Devita, and I'm running for the Arlington County Board in 2025. And I wanted to begin my remarks by thanking Mr. Platt for giving me this opportunity to talk to you today. And I want to thank all of you for coming out on this very cold winter evening. I'd like to start off by telling you what I'd like to do for Arlington. And these are some of the things I'd like to do if elected. With respect to education, I want to expand internship and after-school programs for Arlington school children. With respect to business, I want to temporarily lower business taxes for new businesses for a couple of years to see if we can get them in here to help reduce Arlington's 24% commercial.
I'm going to mute somebody who's been talking over you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to try to get some new business into Arlington. Now, we have a 24% commercial vacancy rate, which means that 1 out of every 4 businesses in Arlington is vacant. And that has sort of a cascading effect in that, you know, if the businesses aren't providing taxes, they are not contributing to our tax base. And if they don't do it, it has to come out of real estate taxes, and the residents have to pay for it. With respect to development, I believe in intelligent development. First of all, I want it to be environmentally friendly. And secondly, I want the developers, as they come in, to allow the residents who live here to have a greater voice in the developments that will affect the neighborhoods where the development's taking place. I believe in finding a solution to Arlington's affordable housing problem that doesn't unnecessarily increase density. I want to fill the vacancies in Arlington's police department, fire department, sheriff's department so that we can increase public safety. I want to see more charging stations for electric vehicles. I want to increase bike lanes. And I'd like to see if we can increase rail service in Arlington to help out the environment. I also want to provide leadership for the Democratic Party. I think the first thing that we need to do is to analyze why we lost the election nationally. And in order to do that, I'd like to set up an organization I'm going to call the Arlington Group and seek out ideas, new ideas for the Democratic Party. And I encourage anybody who has new ideas to contact me. I believe that the best days of the Democratic Party are ahead of us, not behind us. I believe that we need to get back to traditional Democratic principles. Arlington used to stand shoulder to shoulder with labor unions, and the Democratic Party used to be the party of the working classes. The Democratic Party used to be the party of the little guy, and I think we need to get back to that. One thing I do want to emphasize is that even though we have lost the House and the Senate, we're not powerless. You don't actually have to hold political power to have hold office, rather, to exercise political power. You can take a look at somebody like Nelson Mandela. He was spent 30 years in jail in South Africa, and he was still the most powerful person in the country. We can file suit to block what Trump is trying to do, and we can protest. And we need to show Donald Trump that we're not going to give up and that we're not going to give in. Democracy is just too important. We can't just sit back, and we have to continue to fight for what we believe in. We need to start a resistance movement. And I want to build that movement. I want to be there to fight with Donald Trump, and I want to make sure that the Democratic Party continues to lead the fight. Boycott Tesla. Make America rational again. Vote Devita for county board. Thank you.
We're going to hold questions for James so we can bring Kathleen up. So I'm going to ask her to sort of come before when I talk into the microphone, which might help you people know what's going on here. Kathleen Clark has arrived, and we're going to hold questions for James until after she finishes, because she's got a hard stop at 1. So we're going to bring her up now, and she's our newly elected school board member. And with great pride, I introduce you to Kathleen Clark.
Hi, everybody. So thanks for having me here today. I'm on day 14, right? Today's the 14th. So I'm on day 14 of the job. And in that time we had a snowstorm. Nothing to see here, and we've got we're doing the ongoing budget. This is budget season, busy time. So so far, I have to tell everybody, I want to sing some praises here because I don't think we sing enough praises of staff. I've an Arlington County resident for basically my entire adult life, my entire childhood. I went through APS, and healthy skepticism is a good thing. But there's talk over the years of how people work together and what that means for community, what that means for our schools. I have to tell you guys, my introduction to and my onboarding in the last month has been phenomenal. The care and the support that Dr. Duran's team has given me gives me a lot of comfort in knowing that I feel good with not just the people that I'm working with, but all the information that they're sharing and providing to us. It has been a very, very good onboarding experience, and I want to put that out there because I don't think we say that enough. It should be seamless. It should flow like that. But all of us have worked in jobs where that is not the case. And I think given the challenges that everyone is under, our school system no different. Thinking about starting off on the right foot, I feel set up for success at this point to be able to start with my first school board meeting on Thursday. So that's really important to me, and I think it should be important to everyone else here because y'all are constituents and you pay taxes, and that that's important. So I do feel good about that. You guys know it's budget season. So budget, if you guys were at the DEMS meeting on Wednesday night, I know Mary talked about it briefly, but the budget outlook isn't great. And the reason why it's not great is a couple different things. So thinking back to, I don't know how long everybody here has been in Arlington, but there are decisions happening. There are budget impacts right now that began 40 years ago. And so what do I mean by that? So 40 years ago, when I was in school, we were closing the schools down, right? And then all of a sudden, back in the mid-90s, population started increasing again. And then we had drastic increases in a very short period of time, to which we had to make new schools. We had to build new schools here in Arlington. So if you reflect back to 40 years ago, we were getting rid of properties. So Reed was an elementary school until I was in first grade, and then Reed was gone. Now we have Cardinal there now, but we had to build that. So a lot of these issues that we talk about with budget have impacts from years and years and years ago. How does that impact our budget now? Well, when we build the new schools, we issue bonds to do that work, and that bond debt comes out of our operating budget, and that's about $70 million. At least it was last year. So And each year that increases more as we issue more bonds to do new builds. Our population of our schools is leveling off. We have a couple more projects that are still in the pipeline. That doesn't mean we're not going to have growth, and it doesn't mean that we have seats where kids are. So in North Arlington, we've had the most amount of we have fewer students in North Arlington now than we did 20 years ago. So we have more seats available there in North Arlington, but we've had all this tremendous build. So if you go right over here to Potomac Yard, in that area, Potomac Yard's had tremendous growth. I was there the other day, and I was looking around. I could not believe how many apartments and condos they put there. And there are kids coming out of those condos. So if you look at Oak Ridge and Gunston, their populations there, they have their populations are exploding, where other areas of Arlington are decreasing. And I think that's really important perspective to have, because this is cyclical. So 22205, 22207, where there's a decrease now, those houses are going to turn over and they will have growth again at some point. All that to say is, when I'm thinking about my budget decisions now, living these impacts 40 years later from when those decisions were made, I'm being very intentional with the decisions I make from a budget perspective, so that we can think about what this is going to look like, a generation from now, and not have to cobble together budgets. So speaking of cobbling together budgets, we can put together budgets the next 1 to 2 years, no problem. We have this revenue sharing with the county, which is stable, right? We have, I think it's 46.8% of that revenue share, so that helps us do a better job of planning. What isn't great is when we don't have that full tax base coming in, and we don't have that commercial, right? This is the same problem the county's having. So when we break it down and what that means for the schools, our budget isn't sustainable. In part, when you think about the breakdown, you have 80% of our budget is basically salaries. And you should expect, right, a cost of living adjustment. You should expect some sort of increase every single year to handle the increase. In that same respect, as the bond debt has increased because we've had to take more bonds to address the decisions made 40 years ago, which may have made sense at that time, we are now in a position where we have a ballooning budget, and that's a sizable chunk, as far as I'm concerned, of debt that's there. Does that mean that we can still take out more debt and be okay? Yes. Does it mean we should? I don't know the answer to that question yet. And we've got some private consultants that are, Baker Tilly is helping us do some analysis on those numbers to make sure that we can sense check this. So I definitely feel like we have our work cut out for us, not as much for this year and next year, but definitely for the years ahead. And the reason why I say for the years ahead is because when you look at the county budget, county can also put together budgets for next year or two pretty easily. But when you start looking at the metro, right, the challenges that may come with metro and the funding that could go away from that, that is a big challenge. So I think it's three or 4 years from now, we have some state money and some federal money that's helping to pay for the metro, but then we have to take that over again unless somebody else is going to pay for it. So all that to say is, everything that we're doing right now, I want to make sure is reasonable, sustainable, and also takes into consideration the most important piece, which is our students and our student outcomes. We should be focused on our student outcomes. So all of these budget decisions that we're making should be benefiting, at the end of the day, our students. So how does transporting kids from South Arlington to North Arlington, where there are seats available, if that was the case, right? That's not a great experience for our kids. So we have to think about the buildings. We have to think about the dollars spent. We have to think about where those kids are learning, in order to make sure that we're thinking about all of this holistically. Again, not just here, but 3 years from now and 10 years from now, and everything that we're doing is going to have impacts 40 years from now, potentially. So I want to be mindful of all that. And then in terms of like working norms, obviously, if you're at the meeting on Wednesday or have rewatched it or read Mary's statement, there were some statements about how the school board works together, how the members work together, how we may, maybe work with staff. I think what's really important for everyone to know is that anytime that there is dynamics, where there are differences of opinion, sometimes there are friction points. I know that's very politically correct there, right? Friction points. But I truly believe that we don't need uniform consensus on everything, and that disagreement, healthy conversation and disagreement is better. One of the things that I like to challenge folks on is that thought process that we only have to do the same because this is the way we've always done it. We can't do the same. If you look at our student profile from when I graduated APS to now, we have a very different profile. And frankly, we have a much better way of doing things. Because if you ask what happened to special education in 1995 when I graduated, special education was segregated. It was totally segregated, right? My son, who is autistic, some of you may have met him at meetings. He is very much in the community. He would be separated, and that's the way they did things back then. Guess what? We don't do that now. We have come to learn that is not the best way to do things. We do still have some populations of students that are segregated, but we are working to improve that inclusive model in our schools because we know that it improves every outcome for all of the students. So if you use that as sort of a baseline and model that we're going forward, guess what? That costs more money. So there are things intrinsically that not only does that cost more, it's the right thing to do. We can't think about things in that same manner that we did back then and expect the kind of outcomes that we expect now. Does that make sense? And then the other thing that I would say is, just like the county has constituent concerns about how we're using funds and what we're using them towards, APS has the same concerns. So we, with our limited funds that we do have, we're going to get constituents from every avenue, saying, don't cut this, don't cut this, don't cut this. Where do we think about prioritizing what we do cut? So I was in a conversation earlier today with some amazing staff members just to understand some of the nuances in our budget right now. And there's some really important, I'll give you an example of one place where we can perhaps lead differently. There are some changes that happen to Medicaid waivers for schools where we can there's a change, there's been a change in the last 12 months in how we can account for billing, so that APS can be reimbursed for eligible students for some of these services. So there's money on the table to be had for services. Now, if you were to ask me 5 years ago if I would have told people to go do this, as a parent, I would have said absolutely not. Because if you have a child that needs services for special education, let's say in speech therapy, and they are also receiving that speech therapy privately, do you know what happened? They got billed twice. Guess what the insurance company did versus Medicaid? They said, nope, you already received that service. We're going to deny it. And then the parents were having to spend way more money. In the last 12 months, there have been changes to how this coding takes place, which gives me great comfort to know, not only as a parent that lives and works and breathes this every day, it also gives me comfort as a school board member to know that I wouldn't be necessarily leading parents astray by saying, please do this process because it will help our schools. Previously that could have added hours a week to parents having to navigate insurance. I'm not putting that on somebody's plate to have to go do it, but I got some information today that I'm actually going to go dig into a little bit more on my own personally to see, like, I'm not going to give anybody information that I don't actually validate, test, and do it myself. My son is eligible for certain services. We're going to go test this because I want to make sure that if I'm providing a recommendation, I can speak to it. I can speak to the process that I went through, and I can speak to what that could mean for the schools. Tying that all the way back around to how we're leading as a board, the 5 of us together feel very, very firmly that we should be leading by example. Each of us is going to do that in our own way. We all have different strengths that we bring to the table. My knowledge base happens to be what I live every day, which is special education. But I also have this finance audit background so that I can dig in and ask these deep questions to understand where these, if we are leaving money on the table, how much, who's it, where, like, how do we get it? And tapping into, so asking those deeper level questions so that we can really think about things holistically. So I will pause there and see if anyone has any questions.
Do you know at this time whether the CIP will just sort of continue on as it has been, or are you guys rethinking that?
So actually on my to-do list tonight is my my reading for Thursday's board meeting, and that is one of the topics that we're covering. So can I say more to come on that for the
Sure.
CIP?
Rose?
Yeah.
Kathleen and I are in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I'm 31.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's 40 houses. Yeah. So the question was about the Grove, which is that new community there on Wilson, off of Wilson and McKinley Road near ATS. And there's projected 40 houses, which would, based on the house cost and size, you're probably going to have about 2 kids a piece there. That's 80. So that actually makes the planning unit that we're in 24030, I think, is our planning unit. It makes that the largest. If we truly get 80 kids out of there, I think we now have the largest planning unit in APS, bigger than some of the apartments. And the reason why that's important is, at the center of the county, this is one of the schools where was in that 4-way move 5 or so years ago. And so those kids will go to Cardinal. Cardinal's not at capacity, so we're okay there. As Cardinal was built for 730 kids or so in that range.
I hate this,
Yeah.
those are get money.
Yeah. Yep. We'll get the revenue. We'll get the tax revenue.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. So how does that all tie in? We have, it's a budget item, but it's also, the size of the schools. So you're going to have some schools that have 380 kids right now, right? And we have some schools that are well over 700 for elementary. This is just elementary. So now you have a range of elementary experience between 380 kids and in some cases 400 more students than that. So
What's the average class size and the elementary?
depends on the grade. So it can range from about 20 to upwards of 28 or so, depending on the grade.
Other questions? Yes, Jim.
Yeah.
What's your biggest priority for this coming year?
Great question. My biggest priority, well, I think it's twofold. We got to get the budget to a place where we're not cobbling it together, but that is a multi-year process. Because there are things that we just need to weed through some of this stuff to figure out if we still need to do it or not. Aside from budget, I am really passionate about parent training. So parent training. I went through the benefit of having a neurodiverse kid is that I didn't have to live up to anyone else's standard. I wasn't worried about what anybody else was doing. I just needed help figuring out my 4 wants. And what I'm seeing now, and what I'm hearing from the community, I think I've shared the example before. My brother-in-law is a biomedical engineer at Cornell. And some of his feedback to me is, Kathleen, kids aren't coming with the ability to fail. He goes, in science, you have to fail, dust yourself off, get back again, and reiterate. So you have to have an approach. You have to have a resiliency to you to be able to do things time and time and time again. And if you look at what's happening with our kids, they're going off to college. She's like, I'm Ivy League. We haven't seen that until now, but kids aren't always coming now with those skills to fail and try. That resiliency that comes over time, parents have, taken into, they try to make things easier either on the student or on themselves. We're fixing a lot of things for our own kids. And I think that's challenging. And I think I'm really passionate about doing parent training to help so we can help our kids have the skills necessary in life, whether they go to college or whether they go into trade and professions right away. There are certain skills that are required. And I am really passionate about helping parents acquire those skills. It looks very different now than it did when I was in school. I feel like you need a master's degree to get through parenting now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about the charter school jurisdiction. I actually went to read in first,
Oh, okay.
then back again in 6th grade when it became Lee Reed.
Yeah.
They switched the boundaries. I went up to Lee.
Yes. Yeah.
Last elected president from Lee.
Great.
Yeah. It's full of
Yeah.
Great power. But I'm curious, where is the cardinal
Boundary. So,
does it reach out to
it does in one little portion. So if you think about Madison Manor, it's like 3/4 of Madison Manor. There's the teeny tiny tip of Madison Manor up where Sycamore Street is. There's a little portion of that still goes to Tuckahoe. Within Dominion Hills neighborhood, Dominion Hills is split 1 street away from Patrick Henry. I don't remember what that road is. Maybe Lebanon is where the road that is the divider. So half of that goes to Ashland, the other portion goes to Cardinal, and it sort of loops around. So we've got most of, let me think about what that neighborhood name is. Bluemont, that's on this side of 66, near Lacey Woods.
And then the Westover neighborhood.
We have the Westover, we have portion of Overly Knolls. Yeah.
But all these maps, all the catchment area maps are on the website.
Yeah, they're all on the website. Yeah. Yeah, about 700 kids. Okay.
I think, but you also have that personal, the inside of it's operating at different levels, of your kids. Those who are gifted to autistic, and it makes me so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Listen, what that, you know, it's not endless dollars going in and out, but can we afford this?
Yeah.
How can we afford it?
Yeah.
Where can we find more room?
Right. 100%. You're welcome. I'm really excited to dig in and do this.
Do you have a rough idea of what percentage of the total APS budget is federal grants?
It's not, we get very, very little from the federal. It's maybe 7 or so percent. It's, yeah, I mean, that's like 20% of our budget is coming from the state. So the bigger impacts from coming down from the state level are instructional. The instructional challenges that I see this year, and I will speak to sort of where in theory, we want kids, and we want our English learners to be proficient as fast as we can, right? No parent wants to be like, hey, I want my kid to, flounder and struggle. The school system still doesn't want your kids to struggle. But the reality is somebody that has taken Spanish, I took Spanish for years, but I haven't touched it. I'm not fluent in it anymore. I could muddle my way through it. But it would take me over a year, 2, 3 years to pick it up with where I was in college. We are tasked now as a school division to get our English learners at a proficient level in a year and a half. While at the same time, we don't have all of the exams available in Spanish. They are working on doing the SOLs and having those available. But if you don't make the content available in a language that the children know, that we're asking teachers to teach them, and they have 2 jobs now. They have to learn English full time and they have to learn the material full time. And that is an incredible task to expect. I also think we need to have it is. It really is a catch-22. And I think we do have we should have a high expectation of things, but it is really important to me that we balance this. Yeah.
So Kathleen has a hard.
I'll take this question and then I gotta.
I was a substitute teacher with the teams.
Yeah.
Last couple of years, I was pretty much language.
Okay.
And my question is, what is the funding level of Arlington versus Fairfax? Because that was always.
So special education funding for the state is not great. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. So Arlington, Fairfax, in terms of our services that we provide, are pretty similar. I don't know that there's a big differentiation there. Because they're a big. Oh, it's much worse, right? Because yeah, it is worse there. Yeah. Okay.
So do you want to just take 1 second to tell people how they can watch the school board meeting on Thursday and follow your progress?
Oh yeah. So if you're interested in watching the school board, you can go into Arlington Public Schools school board meetings. If you Google it, it'll take you in there. Make sure you get Arlington, Virginia, because otherwise you'll wind up in Texas or some other place. And you can watch the school board meeting live starting at 7:00 on Thursday. Yeah.
State school, Jefferson, that suffered.
Are you, when you say that, are you referring to TJ? Thomas,
No, this high school
amendment?
of science, the
Yeah,
seats in the other.
yes, yeah. We have about 120 seats right now. Has that suffered?
Yeah.
I don't know that that has suffered under the administration. They've had some
Litigation over
litigation on, yes, on how they're deciding the students that get to go there. I do think, yeah, that has been an ongoing litigation. And this is my personal opinion. We need to do, you can't out tutor somebody who's been tutored since the age of 4, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that that student is gifted. They've had opportunity in excess. I want to make sure that we are thinking about this in a way, and those seats are going to truly gifted folks.
Not just advantage.
Not just advantage. Advantage is one thing, right? But like, I want to make sure that we are thinking very intentionally. I from a DEI perspective, from my background in equality and belonging at Gap Inc., I'm very, very passionate about making sure that we are not thinking about just the tutoring aspect.
Yeah, that actually counts.
Yeah, okay.
But things like this ring,
Yeah.
always saying,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys.
We're going to let James take the hot seat again,
Okay.
and we're going to grill him. Yeah. And again, I apologize for interrupting, but I know that your opening statement had so many thought-provoking remarks that I'm sure there are questions from the audience. The first question I want to ask you is, what is your fiscal responsibility philosophy? What do you want to do to make sure that Arlington taxpayers get value for their dollars?
I think that's a good question. I think there's obviously, income and outgo. And I think the first thing that I'd like to do, I think, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, if you drive around Arlington or walk down the streets, every time you look, you'll see businesses that are just empty. And I think that the first thing I'd like to do is just get some new business in. If we get new business in, we'll have more money from the tax revenue to be able to afford more programs. And then on the flip side, as far as outgo goes, I certainly wouldn't want to be just sort of blanketly approving things. I'd like to take a look at each proposed expenditure one at a time, ask myself, whether it makes sense for the county, whether it benefits people, and just kind of I'm not a tax and spend liberal. I would like to just evaluate things and make sure that if we're spending money, it's for a good purpose. And I think that's the philosophy I'd approach. But I think the most important thing, like I said, is the supply side at this point, is trying to get in new business so that we can fund things, so that that we don't have to increase taxes for people. Which is not to say I'm a conservative. I just think that if you're looking at a situation where 1 out of every 4 businesses is vacant, we just got to do something to get new business into Arlington. I don't know whether the landlords have rents too high. I don't know whether the fact that the pandemic slowed things down. I think there's a whole lot of reasons why we've lost business, but it's just absolutely essential to get more business into Arlington.
Are they going to get back to, building that up, the original plan?
I think that's a great point. I mean, when Amazon came in, they had big plans and then they scaled them back. In fact, there was a project that they were going to do on Columbia Pike. They were actually going to put a grocery store in there. And then all of a sudden that just went away. And, I think that's something that we should focus on. We should definitely talk to them and see if we can get them, back on task, in terms of, doing the developments that they promised us. They on the plus side, they have had some impact there. If you take a look at the buildings that they put in, the park they put in, I would give Amazon some points for a couple of things. One is, like I said, for putting in the buildings they did put in. They've also made some advances on affordable housing. They put a building in over there where they actually subsidize some of the units, and it's called Crystal House. And you can actually buy, condo units over there, below market, which I think is something that we need to look at for other corporations. If people want to come in and develop, I see development as a two-way street. If we're going to allow them to come in and do business, I think they have a responsibility to also give back to the community.
Was there any signed agreements from when they,
Yes, it was, and there's
are they being held to that?
their commitments in terms of job creation and the state and Arlington concessions are contingent upon that. But go ahead and James.
No, I think you're absolutely right, and I don't know whether it was an economic downturn for them, but I do think they should be held responsible for what they promised us, and the promises went both ways. We gave them the ability to come in and do what they wanted to do, and if they promised economic development, I think they need to deliver. Are there any other questions? I'm here.
Just on your handout, you have several items about education that include the words, I believe, or expand, perhaps things like that.
Right.
Do you see changing percentage of the county revenue going to the schools?
I think I would consider that. I mean, the two things that two or three things I'm proposing, internship programs and after-school programs for kids. I think that what I would like to see is to give these kids some real opportunity to get job training and to get the type of training that they would help them succeed in the future. And so those are two things that I think that are very important. And if we have to spend more money for that, I think it's well spent. I think also increasing funding for mental health counseling. I think a lot of times you'll have kids who have emotional problems, psychiatric problems, and they're just not addressed. And I think that's what leads to kids getting into trouble, getting into crime. So if we could expand that, I think that would be a good idea as well. Arlington's class sizes, I think, are too high. I think we need to reduce them a bit to give the kids more attention. So to answer your question, it's a long answer to a short question, but if it means spending more money on education, I'm for it.
Okay, Robert.
One school of thought on the last couple elections, why the Democrats did not do well, is that gotten too liberal, too radical.
Yeah.
We need to move more. Could you comment on that?
Yeah.
We need to be more central, or whatever it is, move to the center or be moderate.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and which is not to say I don't think we should abandon our values, but I think it's just a matter of what you emphasize, and I think that the Democrats would probably have a lot better opportunity to get elected if they started focusing more on economic issues. I think the primary reason we lost the last election is that, and it's not our fault, but, grocery prices got higher. And I think whether it made sense or not, I just don't think that we did enough of a job, basically touting the fact that the economy in some ways is not really doing that bad. I mean, when you get right down to it, unemployment is low, the stock market's doing very well. And I just don't know if we did enough of a job of convincing people that the economy is doing well. And I think that what we really need to do, rather than emphasize social issues all the time, and I'm not saying we abandon our stands on them, but I think that what we want to do is appeal to more of a centrist type of philosophy. Try to bring in people who may not be as receptive to some of the social issues, but are really concerned with how they're going to make it day to day. And I think you're absolutely right. I felt the same way. It's just that it's not that we want to retreat on things we believe in, but it's a matter of what you want to emphasize. And I think that we need to emphasize economic issues.
Yeah, I think we to looking after the parents, how do they help out in some respect, realizing they've got some issues of fighting for. And just generally, I mean, cost of car expensive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you get a new car, plus the property tax, all these things that they're looking, saying, how can I afford even in 10 and 12 years when my child is off to college, how can I even possibly afford state college if it's on up?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. As you and I were talking about, Rose, I think that what we really need to be able to communicate to these people is how are we going to make their lives better tomorrow? You know what I mean? What are you going to do? I hate to say this, but I think most people are looking at their own lives and what they're going through every day. And I think that we have to be able to convince people that we are going to do something for them on the economic side that's going to make their lives better. And I think that we're going to get a lot further with that, then perhaps, once again, not that I say we have to retreat, but if you lead with abortion, I hate to be this blunt, you're going to lose half the country. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying we retreat, but I'm saying maybe we don't emphasize that as much as we emphasize economics. And I think when you get right down to it, you're going to appeal to a whole lot more people because everybody can relate to that. Whereas if you look at some of the social issues, it only appeals to the democratic side of the world. I think that what we have to do, not that we retreat, and not that we abandon our principles, never. But what do we want to emphasize? Do we want to emphasize something that's going to divide people? Or do we want to emphasize something that's going to unite people? And I think that what will unite people are the economic issues.
Abortion will be there.
No, I understand it. Let me answer your question directly. Who do you think they think is going to do a better job on abortion? It's not the Republicans. We don't need to pound the table on abortion. What we need to do is pound the table on things that are going to make people think that their lives are going to be better, their economic situation is going to be better. I don't think we need to emphasize abortion. I think they know. Everybody knows what the Democratic Party's position is on abortion. But what are you going to do tomorrow? Put cheaper groceries on my table. That's what people are going to be concerned about. And once again, I'm not saying retreat. I'm saying, what do you emphasize? I would emphasize the economic stuff.
Yeah, I think a big part of this last election cycle wasn't really so much that the issues we lost on, it was the message.
Yeah.
Getting out really what we have accomplished.
Yep.
And, selling that more. And, a lot of people these days don't read the newspaper, don't even watch the news. They get the news from something like TikTok or some online junk. And, we have to first invade that space, get our good messages into that more. And we have to be very concerned, I think, about what this new regime coming in is trying to do to any sense of free and fair press.
Yeah,
They're going after it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you 100%. I mean, if I were running, I would have told the American public the unemployment rate's the lowest it's ever been.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is it's a terrible economy.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. But if you emphasize, some of the actual facts, like I said, unemployment is low, and once again, yeah. Yeah, and
that's just all people. That's all they have to say. They took off more than they did the pandemic.
Yeah.
Also think that, I'm sorry, Steven.
Sure.
Getting back to Arlington,
Yeah.
you said that you wanted to attract more business
Right.
to Arlington.
Right.
What are your plans for doing that?
Well, what I think we ought to do is offer an introductory tax rate for new business. If somebody wants to come to Arlington and say, look, we'll lower your taxes, for a few years if you commit to coming in for like 7 years. And I think if we can offer them lower business taxes, that's one way. The other thing is that there are some zoning regulations that prevent certain types of businesses from starting up in certain areas, and I'd like to adjust that. So those are two ideas. And then the other thing, I think we just got to do outreach. If we know that there are businesses who are interested in coming to Arlington, like an Amazon or something, that we reach out to them and offer them incentives to come. I just, I think the pandemic had a horrible, horrible effect in this country, in that it basically emptied out restaurants, it emptied out little shops and little stores. People are not venturing out; they're buying their things on Amazon, and I think that we've got to try to reverse that somehow. And we got to do whatever we can do to bring in more business, and not because I'm pro business per se, but just because of the effect it has on taxes. Like, if the businesses aren't paying the taxes, we all are. So I think that we need to get more business into Arlington, and those are two of the ideas I had. Give them an introductory lower introductory tax rate, and adjust zoning so more business can come in.
Pros to recruit people to the sheriff's office, police, and fire.
That's a good question, because I talked to the police chief, and I said to him, is it salaries? And he said, no, not really. And I said, well, are you offering them incentives? And he says, yeah, we are. And I asked him, I said, well, what do you think might help? And I think this ties into the whole affordable housing thing. I think the real problem for a lot of the people who want to work on the police department, the sheriff's department, is just being able to afford to live here. And I would like to try to offer them some incentive, maybe housing vouchers, something like that, so that they, not only are they getting a good job with a good salary, but they're getting something to help them, reduce the cost of living. I think that's the other incentive we might be able to offer to bring in some more people.
But when I'm 66, and when we first got our first house, it was horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely, that's a big problem, when you realize I'm 66 too, by the way, but when you realize that your children are not going to be able to afford to live here, it's very disconcerting. And I think that the only way I've thought about it, not to bring up a really sore subject, but I think the missing middle had its heart in the right place, but I don't think its head was anywhere close to where it needed to be. The problem with the missing middle is that, first of all, the prices I'm seeing for those new units are like over $1 million. So if the idea was that it was going to lower prices so people could come in, I think it's a total farce. But on the other hand, the question is, if you're not going to do that, let them people build 6-unit condos in single family neighborhoods. If you're not going to do that, what do you do? And I think you almost have to get the government involved in subsidizing the housing in some fashion. The project in Amazon, I thought, was an interesting example. This Crystal House, my recollection is that you can buy a condo there for something like under $90,000. And the reason you can do that is the housing got subsidized. Amazon put some money in, the county put some money in, and as a result, you get affordable housing. If you don't subsidize it and you leave it to the market the way the missing middle does, it's just not going to work, because the market in Arlington is over $1 million. You know what I mean? So I guess, once again, just to summarize, good idea. Try to get some low cost housing into Arlington, but you're not going to do it by putting up 6-unit condos in single family neighborhoods, because they're going to charge $1 million a piece for the condos. What you got to get is you got to get the government involved in subsidizing. You've got to talk to developers when they come in and say, hey, look, you want to come into our neighborhood, you want to build, fine. We'll let you make a profit, but maybe set aside a few of these condos for lower income people. The government has to be involved in subsidizing or making deals with the developers, in my opinion.
Yeah, problem with subsidization, yeah, it is the government, better salaries, but if the companies pay better salaries, they don't need to pay a government tax to subsidize. I mean, it's like, why run all this through the government? If somebody is building high-rise condo at $1 million a unit. They aren't doing it if they don't have a market. They're going to build in the market now. So it's like you can't. I don't see how you can intervene in letting the system work itself out.
Right. I mean, in some ways, you can throw up your hands and say, "Hey, look, the market's going to do what the market's going to do." You know what I mean? And if you do that, the problem though is that you'll never get any affordable housing. I think
Cheap
cheap housing. Well, cheap housing. Yeah. Well, the idea is that school teachers and policemen and firemen can't afford to live here on the salaries that they have, and like I said, once again, I think the problem with the missing middle is that thinking that the market's going to solve the problem is just a fantasy. I think that what you've got to do is, if you really want to produce, I'm not saying spend an inordinate amount of money on it, but if you do want to have some affordable housing in Arlington, I think the government has to be involved, either by cajoling the developers into providing it, or by maybe directly subsidizing some units. Maybe attracting more police and fire people is important to us, important enough that we want to give them a little housing subsidy of some kind. That's the idea. Now, some people would say, "Hey, look, let the market do what it's going to do." But I think the majority of people in Arlington really feel bad that kids can't live here, and I think they want to do something about it.
If you want to give this a salary plus as a Section 5, it still is. We will pay you X.
Okay, but let's not have a broad philosophical discussion. Does someone have a specific question for James on his platform?
On what?
His platform.
I'd like to see the Metro run up Columbia Pike.
Just wanted to tell you, I wanted to tell you my mantra. My mantra is missing middle was always a solution looking for a problem.
Okay, I believe you. Yeah.
The second is, it's not a question so much as something that popped into my mind while you were talking about attracting business, and that is public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
So it's something that you might see Arlington getting into.
Yeah, absolutely. I see. I look at development as a two-way street. People want to come in and they want to make money, and I have no problem with people making money. I think it's great if you come in and make money. At the same time, though, you're coming in to be our neighbor. You're coming in to build a building here. You're coming in here to be present here, and I think that we actually have the right to expect a little bit back in return. If you want to come in, you want to build, maybe you give back to the community a little bit. Maybe instead of having 1,000 units all at market price, maybe you have like 950, and we've got 10 units for affordable housing. Or maybe Amazon put in a park, for example. There's a park out in front of the Amazon building. You know what I mean? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think these people make enough money. I think they make a tremendous amount of money by coming here, and I think that we have the right to talk to them and say, "Hey, look, if you want to come in, that's fine. What can you do for the community?" And I think that fosters some goodwill too. If a business comes in and they can say, "Hey, look, we moved to Arlington and we did this for the community. We did that for the community." And I think it helps the business too. Did that answer your question? Okay.
All right. Do you want to just summarize and tell us in 2 minutes or less where your website is and how your campaign is going and how people can get involved in your campaign?
Absolutely. The website, if you just type into the computer Devita for Arlington County Board or Devita for Arlington County Board, it'll come up. I need help. It's tough running for office. What I need help primarily with is campaign contributions. Last couple of years, I spent $75,000 a year of my own money to run. It's not cheap. So any little bit will help me. So if you'd like to make a campaign contribution, you can do that through the website. If anybody's inspired enough to volunteer, I always could use some help knocking on doors or calling people. And to summarize my campaign in about 30 seconds, I want to do more for education. I want to try to bring new business into Arlington. I want to try to increase public safety by filling the vacancies in the police and the fire department. I want to do more for the environment. But even more than that, what I really want to do, more than anything, is to be a leader in the Democratic Party. I think that we need to fight Trump. I think we need to show that we're not going to give in. I think it's really, really, really important that we stand up for things as simple as democracy. I think no man's above the law. I think that we need to get back to our bedrock principles. And so one thing I want to emphasize as I'm running is I just don't want to be a seat on the county board. I want to be a leader. I want to make people get up and fight. We need to fight. We can't just sit back and let Trump do what he's going to do. So that's what's important to me.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And our next meeting is on the second Tuesday in February. So I would urge you all to mark that on your calendar. And we want to thank you for participating, and we'll see you next month.